Awesome.
Cool. Hey,
Thank
I
you.
know Lauren Johnson.
Oh, well, awesome. Thanks, Lauren.
What's up, Lauren? You're on mute and you're hiding from us.
And then I'll be going back and forth if
Oops,
people
sorry.
actually come
We're
into the
now
Zoom.
in
Hey, I know Lauren
dual.
Johnson.
All right, so hi, Lauren. EveAnna Manley, thank you so much for being with us in Women in Audio. You were working with the old vacuum tube logic American Factory. And in 1989, you were 20 years old on sabbatical from Columbia University, and you learned how to solder and assemble the vacuum tube amplifiers. And then it was at around this time that Manley professional products were developed. Soon following the Manley Pultec EQ, the mid frequency EQs. And in 1993, Manley Labs became a separate entity in Chino, California, outfitted to house the Manley Hi Fi and Pro Studio manufacturing. And I would just like to thank you so much for being with us today. And can we start with just how are you doing and how did you get into music?
Oh, all those things. I got into this business 32 years ago when I took a semester off from college and drove out to California and got a job learning how to build tube amplifiers with my hands. When I first walked in that factory, I looked around like, what are these things? Are they're like, oh, those are vacuum tube monoblocks. I'm like, is that like a receiver? They're like, kind of. It's just the amplifier part, but I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. And
Yeah.
I just started on the ground floor and
Wow.
learned how to do that stuff from day one.
Amazing. So, what was the draw?
Uh, I was studying music in college, and I was a big old band geek, and studying music theory. And a couple things influenced me. One was my stepfather, who owned the Ampeg company in the late 60s, and they developed the SVT during that time, and the Rolling Stones were using Ampeg setup. And dad also owned a couple other companies, such as the Dan Armstrong Guitar Company, the Emmons Steel Guitar, and the Grammar Guitar Company. So he had a little conglomeration going there in the late 60s that he sold before he met my mother. So he was all cleared out from that industry by the time that he came into our lives in the mid 70s. But all the stories about, meeting Eric Burden and the Animals or Johnny Cash or, my step siblings being at Woodstock, those were a big influence to me.
Wow.
And the second influence was one day in class in college, Bill Graham, the producer, sorry, not producer, the concert promoter up at, he was from, he created and fostered the whole San Francisco music scene in the late 60s with the Fillmore West and the Fillmore East and Winterland and all that kind of stuff. He came to teach our class and explain the music industry to us. And that's what really hooked me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like that day I decided to take the next semester off and go figure out my career in the music industry. So that's how it came about. So I just literally took a semester off, got in my Volkswagen Beetle, drove across the country, landed in LA, and I got this gig building tube amps. So I never actually made it up to San Francisco to pursue, something in live sound with
Yeah.
Bill Graham presents. But that was anyway. That was the trajectory I was on.
Yeah, faded. That's amazing. So, your family had a big influence musically. Were there any bands that you grew up loving to listen to that maybe drew you into music as well as a career?
Well, all that psychedelic 60s San Francisco stuff for sure. And along with my older step siblings record collection, they were those records had been put into storage when dad sold the company in 72, and then we got them out of storage like in the early 80s. So I spent the whole of the 1980s like really deep dived into that older music. And a lot of California music,
Yeah.
Neil Young,
Nice.
a lot of
Yeah.
Laurel Canyon stuff too. So California was really calling me. And also, like, I was like a big Jack Nicholson fan and
Oh,
a movie
fun.
fan. So I wanted to come to California in the biggest way.
Nice.
And yeah, it was almost like the forbidden fruit, like
Mhm.
when I was in high school applying to colleges, my parents were like, okay, EveAnna, you can go to any college you can get into. We'll pay for it. We'll send you there as long as it's east of the Mississippi. So, as soon as I was old enough to
Oh,
cross that bridge, literally, that's what I did.
nice. I love it. Were they
You know.
supportive after that?
Um, well, I remember, right before I drove across the country, I was back home in Atlanta, working to save up money for my semester off. So I was working at a picture framing shop, and I remember they said, "Hey, Ivana, your mom's on the phone." So I go pick up the phone. My mother says, "You're not going to California," and I'm like, "Yes, I am." Cool. It's just like,
Oh my
yeah, no, I'm doing that. Sorry.
god. Oh,
Supportive, not especially.
right.
My
Yeah.
dad was, but not my
Well, and it's such a change. I mean, that's such a huge cultural shift as well.
mother.
All the way to California.
No.
Oh my gosh. So, in the 70s to the 80s, though, that's a huge musical shift too, especially near LA. Were you getting into the harder, like, rock scene at that point, punk, or, and then eventually hair metal kind of exploded in LA?
No, I kind of, in the 1980s, I kind of skipped a lot of that because, again, I was so focused on 60s music
Okay.
and 70s music as well. Later in the 80s, I remember just really digging the Talking Heads and David Byrne stuff.
Nice.
And I
Yeah.
always tell the story. I was digging through a record bin up at Harvard Square one weekend when we were up there, and I found this compilation of Brazilian music that I knew nothing about, but it said, compiled by David Byrne. I'm like, well, that has to be good if David Byrne was involved in it. And I bought that record, and it was an introduction for me to the whole world of 1970s MPP, or popular music Brazil,
Mhm. Oh,
um,
wow.
Tropicalia, post bossa nova, all that
Oh, that's so cool.
cool rock music from the late 60s, early 70s, which I
Oh,
still just adore. It's
yeah.
a great place to be.
Oh no, that's awesome. So then through the 90s then with, the grunge explosion, did that hit at all?
Again, I was
Or
kind of late.
were you just kind of
Oh no,
staying
I
with the
was
staying with the 60s and 70s?
no in the early 90s. So it ended up, David Manley and I got married, and he had acquired a giant one-off master tape collection on, 2-track half-inch tape, reel-to-reel tape.
Oh,
And we had this big ass hi-fi system at home and studio tape machines, and we were building playback electronics for that stuff. And when we'd get home, we'd spin up these tapes, and it was all kinds of uh, classic, the real classics like the Fritz Reiner big Russian orchestral stuff mainly. And so I kind of got into a lot of that, and
whoa.
also a lot of audiophile music that was
Right.
specific for, really being able to hear into the equipment. And, you'd use some reference song or a reference record or a reference tape to really be able to, listen to what we were doing as far as building gear goes. So
Oh, cool.
more exploration into that big heavy Russian stuff, that more than I got during music studies in college, say. But so yeah, I kind of ignored the whole grunge thing in the early 90s because I was wrapped up in all that, right?
Yeah.
And then later I got into it. So
Right.
I'm always a little behind the curve musically, perhaps.
Well, and you're so focused in listening through it, right, to the gear.
It depends. So
That's great. Can you give an example of what that might be, like a reference to listen through to the gear, like how you were doing that?
yeah, like um, as soon as I worked through, learning to build the equipment,
Yeah.
soldering, screwing shit together, building boards, building amplifiers. I started, I trained some people to do that. And then I got moved onto a test bench with oscilloscopes and signal generators and things to be able to measure and perform quality control on units coming off the production floor. So part of those early jobs also included a lot of documentation follow up. Like sometimes gear would hit my bench and I'm like, hey, where's the schematic for the? Never mind, there's no schematic. And I'd have to just sit there and reverse engineer the
Wow.
thing that we're building, because there wasn't like proper documentation.
Oh my
And
god.
so I was doing a lot of testing and getting gear working. So
Oh,
there were certain songs that I could pick out, usually on compact disc at that time,
sure.
that would illustrate a problem if a problem exists. Like there would be on Automatic for the People, REM, there's a beginning of Try Not to Breathe. There's very percussive triangle and chicka 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 ching, chicka 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 ching, like that,
Uh-huh.
that has a real quick attack on it. And if the variable mu, if the two triodes aren't lined up real well, you'll hear, and you've got a fast attack set on the limiter, that will present itself as this percussive
Oh,
thuck, this
yeah.
noise,
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
distortion basically. So
Yeah.
sometimes we could find certain recordings like that would bring about problems in the gear. So we're using those tracks as tools, put it that way,
Oh, that's so
in
cool.
the testing process. And then there's other, tapes or songs or records that just sounded amazing, that were really well recorded, that you would use at a hi-fi show to show off the gear, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite of one of those
Oh man,
recorded?
dude, I used to play Rage Against the Machine
Nice.
out of Los Angeles at the audiophile shows and send, half these old guys screaming like, oh, they were so terrified. But
Yeah.
that record sounds so damn
Oh,
good.
that's so cool.
you know,
Range.
dun, 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 dun,
Yes.
dun, dun.
That's so
So
cool.
it sounded good, and
Yeah.
I scared a lot of old men away.
Perfect.
All good.
That's great. So then, how did you move through the 80s with, the tube amplifiers and into more gear and wanting to break away and become Manley Labs?
Right. So, right as I joined the first company, VTL, it was David Manley and his son Luke. They were basically only building audiophile equipment.
Hmm.
And it was actually this Scientologist who found David because he had recorded something in South Africa, and they had his name on a tape or something.
Oh.
They found him and they saw that he was designing equipment, and they were seeking a bunch of outboard mic preamps because they had just bought a George Massenburg console, a GML console,
Mhm.
and they were looking to augment that with a whole bunch of outboard mic pre's. So they were soliciting mic pre designs from
Oh,
guys like David Manley or Mark Levinson, I think, and a couple other,
wow.
revered designers of the
Yeah.
time. And so David uh, made a tube mic pre and submitted it, and it won the shootout, and they ordered 60 units. And that's what basically launched the pro audio division, branded Manley,
Nice.
within the first company. So, um, and that the Micree was the first pro audio product, and then that was followed by a Pultec EQ
Hmm.
thing. And we actually, I went back to Columbia in New York City to finish my degree, and I remember David flying to New York to come visit, and we drove across the GWB in my red Volkswagen and went to Teaneck, New Jersey, and found Eugene Shank, who's the Pultec guy, to try to license the Pultec name or design or something.
Yeah.
he was just not interested. He didn't.
Oh
He's
no.
like, I don't even care. I shut that company down years ago.
Mm.
The EQ part is a Western Electric design. It's not even mine. Whatever. Good luck. Have fun. And but I admire David that he tried to do the right thing.
Yeah, of course.
Back at the time. So that was the second pro audio product, and then David was after we got married. He started drinking again. He was a lot older than I
Mm.
am or were, and um, his alcoholism just it exploded on us and on
Mm.
him, and
I'm
he
sorry.
also was an undiagnosed bipolar disorder
Mm.
person, and there was extreme chaos in the early 90s, and so he was just an angry ball of energy with all that going on.
Mm-hmm.
So he was fighting with his son and fighting with me, and then
Oh.
we split the company, or they split the company in 1993,
Mm-hmm.
and David bought the building that we're still in, and we split the company and moved the Manley stuff, the pro audio stuff, and the Manley hi-fi gear over to where we're at now. And then we dried David up for 3 years, and then he started drinking again, and then
Mm.
effed off and moved to France. And during the course of the divorce, I bought him out of the company because he no longer wanted to deal with anything in California or
Wow.
any of that.
Oh
So
no.
that's how that story happened. But it was
Wow. Crazy.
a very trying time for me.
Yeah.
I
Sorry.
was in my 20s that whole decade. I was really young, and
Oh, that's so young. Oh wow.
yeah, and it was emotional and
Yeah.
you know, broken heart type thing. And
Yes, absolutely.
but anyway, got through all that with the help of all my buddies,
When you come
with
out
the community.
as the CEO, I mean, you have the company, and then how did you decide to keep going with it and delegate and kind of reform your own vision?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because there totally was an emotional component to that. And when David split, I started working on my own designs and then my own visions. And the first pro audio product I came up with was the Vox Box,
Yeah.
and it was kind of meant to be like a greatest hits of existing products we were building combined into one thing with a catchy name, and it looked really cool and still does. And
Yes.
um, you know, all I wanted to hear was like, "Wow, that's awesome! Good job, babe."
Yeah.
But instead, David was just not happy about anybody else's success.
Oh
He
no.
had a real insecurity with that stuff.
That's
And
toxic.
so it was very toxic. And
Yeah.
so as we as I figured that out,
Yeah.
then my next motivation, and then things just were really breaking apart between us. Like it was just very complicated by the alcoholism and all that. But
Mhm.
after that, my motivation became, fuck you, revenge through success. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to
My
be on this team?
style.
Let me show you how awesome this team is here. And that's what really gave me a lot of emotional energy to get through what was like a broken heart
Yeah.
into just working my ass off and really accelerating.
That's amazing. That's so
Yeah.
inspiring.
Yeah, is to use an emotional energy, but
Yeah.
turn it into a positive force. So that even to take negative energies like disappointment or um, anger, and make that fuel
Yeah.
positive energy of creation and expansion and team building, and building community and building friends and all that. So that's where that came from.
That's amazing. That's so difficult to do though. That's so inspiring.
It was crazy, but
Oh.
somehow I keyed into it, and like I said, I started really developing a lot of friends in that time in the late 90s and
Nice.
early 2000s, and um, had so much support from
Great.
the industry,
Yeah.
so many good friends, and that's what we we have to really embrace our friends. That's for
Yes.
damn sure.
Yes, we do. Well, let's talk more about the Vox Box because it is, it's amazing and everyone you say Vox Box and everyone knows what you're talking about. So, can we how did that greatest hits idea come around and what exactly did you want to pull from each into, what became the Vox Box and did you anticipate what would then happen?
Well, at the time, what the most beautiful equipment in the early or mid 90s was that Focusrite Red Range. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
freaking gorgeous.
Yeah.
Um, and I really admired the metalwork and
Mm,
the really very sexy, modern
yeah.
looking gear. That was a real inspiration to me.
Nice.
Um, and they had also a couple lower price ranges from that green, we used to call it the Barney Rubble range. This and then they had I think a silver or platinum range, and they had a combo unit called a voice box, and it was a mic pre compressor EQ type combo unit and
Mm-hmm.
like a channel strip.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that and I'm like, well, they missed the rhyming opportunity is Vox Box. And
Yeah.
so I'm like,
Absolutely.
I'm going to make a combo unit, and it's going to, their unit was a one rack unit tall thing. And I'm like, yeah, well, this is part of my, revenge through success thing. Like, I'm going to make a 3 rack unit, massive, giant, awesome looking thing. It's
Yes.
going to be called the Vox Box. And in the faceplate, you can see the V and the B, in the way the shapes are arranged on the
Right.
faceplate. But the faceplate is not just about being another pretty face. It's
Mhm.
the contrasting the black and the blue
Yes.
inserts, group the sections of the controls, and it's big faceplate with a bunch of knobs, but they're grouped so visually, like, and ergonomically, your hand will go right for
Okay.
what you're looking for. You're not just you don't have like a piece of gear with like rows and grids of knobs that you're trying to, like count battleship, like
Yeah.
A16. Oh, that's the attack control. You know
Yes.
what I mean? So the way I did those shapes and grouped the controls and used, diagonal lines and
Mhm.
curves and things, I think really contributed to make that unit ergonomically a success. It's very easy to find the control that you're thinking about.
Mhm. Mhm. That's amazing.
Oh,
So
what's
how did
that?
how did that come into play with was that just you thinking about the user or bringing ergonomics into it? I
No,
mean,
for sure. And also, we have a machine shop, and I knew what we were capable of machining and making because
okay.
we
Yeah.
had a CNC milling machine at the time. Or we might have just sold that. Yeah, we had just sold that machine, but it was down the road. With and that guy still makes our faceplates on our old machine.
Wow.
But actually, the first prototype we hand made it on our Bridgeports with rotary tables and things like that. But I knew like what we are capable of making. We didn't have to just make rectangular inserts anymore. We could embrace
Yeah.
different shapes and curves and things like that. So
Nice.
that was some of it. But drawing drawing that unit, I mean, I drew it out with a pencil and paper initially,
Mhm.
for sure. That's how the
Wow.
design process went back there, and it still goes that way as well. Like the Manly Force, I started with kind of visualizing what four mic pre's on a panel and how the shapes and how we could just discern the different channels and make them look cool and make them look like a Manly product.
Yes.
And that one, I drew those little inserts. They initially kind of looked like shark fins a little bit, and then the guy I was working with at the shop, he changed them into the current shape. So collaboration is definitely part of the gig as well. It's not
Yeah.
a total draconian operation.
Right. No, that's awesome. Yeah, there has to be, second pair of eyes on everything. Just to make
Sure.
sure. That's so funny. I was just gonna ask about the Force though. I was watching a video with recording drums with the Force, the 4 channel, and how did you think of, okay, 4, is that going to be mostly appealing for drums? Because I mean, it works so perfectly, and you get such a smooth sound with minimal use of mics, but it's a huge sound.
Yeah, I can't say that I was thinking about drum kits per se on that. We were building a 2 channel mic pre, and the labor on that unit, which was squashed into 1U with all the tubes lying down and a lot of hand wiring, labor wise, there were many, many hours of work to build one of those units. So we also had, that's my dog Riley. It's just a delivery guy. Hey, Riley. Hey. There, we had also have this new power supply that came out in the core. This switch mode power supply we call Manley Power these days, and that was another mandate, was all the new products needed to use the new power supply. Okay. So I definitely didn't want to continue making anything in a 1U chassis anymore. It's just too confining, and it ends up adding a lot of labor to be able to squeeze everything into 1U. So it was going to be 2U, and then it's like, well, if we organize a chassis like this, we can fit more than 2 channels in here. And we ran some calculations, and it's like, well, we can fit 4 channels of and drive 4 channels of tubes with this. And then at the very end, we're like, man, that it's going to run kind of hot if we have 8 tubes in the chassis.
Okay.
But let's work on a MOSFET replacement for the output stage 2 triodes and see if we can replace that 1 tube with some MOSFETs. And we worked up a circuit for that, so we could keep the whole unit running cooler, keep the price reasonable as well. It's another thing. We want to hit a price target of $2,500 retail for that unit. And it's a really elegant design, and it builds it flies together in about an hour, as opposed to like 7 hours the 2 channel unit used to take, and thus it's less expensive and made in America.
Yes.
And then also we added the really good looking LED meters that are on there.
Yes.
And that sort of thing.
It's beautiful, and it sounds, the sounds with those drums, amazing. Like,
good. I'm glad you like it.
Oh, great.
It's definitely part of that power supply, pitch is, it is 300 volts. It's high voltage, high current, high fidelity, and very low noise as well. So nice. It's what you need. So that's been a successful product for us, and we're doing real well with it. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks to you. Thanks to you for hearing them and buying them.
No, that's great. Can you talk more about the core, and how that developed as far as
the core at the time in let's see, 2013 basically, I think is when we started working on that. We needed a new product. It had been a few years since we had a new product, and I had hired a consultant to work with me to kind of help the company be a little more profitable and professional, and kind of grow us up from within. And one of the first things he said was, you need a new product, and you need a channel strip. That's what the world wants from you right now in 2013. So it's like, well, we have this Vox box. And he's like, but that's like $4,600. It's too we need like a $2,000-ish unit. That's a combo strip. So there it is. There's the design goal. So we're going to have, a mic pre, we're going to have a compressor, we're going to have an EQ, we're going to have a limiter. And so and it's got to, we have to be able to build it for this cost, and it has to retail for, somewhere between $2,000 and $2,500. Okay. So we had rules, and we had a box that we needed to designed to. So that's what we did. So what we did on the mic pre side, it's pretty similar to the Voxbox mic pre and compressor,
Mm-hmm.
but what's different was we went back to um, the original design for those mic pre's actually came from Steve Hazelton, who was moonlighting with us in the early 90s and also was Doug Sachs, or the Mastering Labs engineer at the time. So the Mastering Lab had this really nifty circuit. It's kind of like an LA2A gain makeup circuit. I mean, the topology is very similar. What was the most clever part about Steve's implementation of that is the gain stage is direct coupled into the output stage, so that
Okay.
there's no capacitor there, and it's kind of trick, and you have to pay attention to a few things to pull it off. But when David first implemented that in the early 90s, he didn't like the output tube that Steve was using. He had some hex against it for a dumb reason. I mean, a dumb reason like you wouldn't get a shot today, right? Some
Mm-hmm.
dumb reason, some stupid mythology.
Yep.
And so, anyway, with the core, it's like, you know what? Let's go back to the original Mastering Lab mic pre-design, part for part, tube for tube. So that's what we did.
Oh.
So it should sound damn similar to original Mastering Lab mic pre's.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's got the same kind of compressor that the electro-optical, the LOP compressor that's in the Voxbox is pretty much mimicked there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the EQ section, we decided for cost reasons we couldn't do the whole passive EQ thing like the Voxbox has, and so we did a Baxendall IC based EQ there. But it's really sweet and flexible, and it works really well. And tonally, the core and the Voxbox sound quite similar, even though they're quite different units. You know, you don't have all those transformers in and out like the Voxbox has.
Yeah.
But if you just bump the EQ just a little bit in the low end, it sounds, you just apply a little meat to the core. I got your meat right here around my core. You just apply a little low frequency boost on there, and it sounds pretty similar to Voxbox at like half the price.
Wow.
And then the limiter is a real fast FET limiter that just, and again, considering the audience of who the core is being sold to, you know, people reporting to their DAWs, we want to have a nice fast limiter there that can stop, you know, none shall pass, and block things from creating overs in your ATB. So
Nice.
it was a well thought out design. It came together very quickly, and we started shipping those. I think we started shipping those in 2014. I think so.
Nice.
So development went pretty quickly. I think we had them shipping within about 9 months from just starting to draw it out.
Is that usual? Like, that seems really fast. Or is
that one moved very quickly, actually. And then, yeah, these days, some of our designs are like years, and it's just like, come on, team, we need these products. But we're actually trying to hire some more people right now because we can't get gear out fast enough. And there's always production issues to have to revisit, you know, like, oh my God, this thing started making a noise. Why is that? You know, we have to dig into engineering to investigate things and
for sure
fix things. And for instance, the Voxbox right now is undergoing a major revision to use the Manley power supply.
Oh wow!
Like we did with the Massive Passive last year. So we're ditching the linear power supply and putting the switcher in there. But it's not just like, you know, plug something in. It's a bunch of engineering that goes into that, and layout work. And this week, for instance, you know, we're investigating like, okay, so if this puppy goes in a rack and you've got some noisy device on top of it, you know, is it going to are the chokes in the EQ going to pick it up? Do we need to put some more shielding? Will this play well with others, basically?
Right.
I mean, we know our unit won't radiate out into other people's stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
the FCC will make sure of that with us. So that will be going to testing. But we also have to make sure that we internally shield sensitive components so that
Okay.
some other noisy thing can't introduce some hum into our unit either. So
Right. Right.
it's all engineering,
That's exciting though.
but that's what we deal with.
Yeah. Um, and I'm super excited. Later this year, we get to work with the studio with the 16 by 2, the line mixer. And so, can you talk a little bit about how the mixer came about and what went into that?
Yeah, the mixer it's a cool device. Why we took it off the market though is because
Mhm.
it just was very um, time consuming and costly to manufacture.
Oh, I
It
tried.
did not lend itself to just pop together and build easy. You know, the even like the board layouts
Mhm.
were kind of manually done in a drafting program as opposed to the modern board layout programs that we would use today.
Yeah.
And thus the fabrication and how you get the boards made, they were all kind of made by hand, as it were.
Okay.
And that product can come back to market, but it needs like all the fresh eyes and fresh technology on it. The circuitry itself is fine.
Mhm.
It's good. It sounds awesome, as you
Yeah.
know.
Mhm.
But the way it's built, I mean, talking about like even how we make the boards, all that stuff needs to be
Okay.
revised today. So there there's quite a few legacy projects like that,
Yeah.
products like that we've taken off the table just because
Sure.
today they're just way too cumbersome to build.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful board though.
Thanks.
Yeah, for
Thanks.
sure. And how did the Universal Audio plugin come about for the Voxbox and the Manley EQ?
The UA relationship, again, developed from friendships.
Mhm.
And I became friends with Erica McDaniel over at Universal Audio. Now, she is the longest serving employee at UA these days,
Awesome.
besides Bill, the owner. Um, and I remember meeting her at a trade show, and this is why trade shows are so important, like because you network and you meet people.
Sure.
And we'd plug something in Amsterdam, and somebody forgot to change the freaking voltage and blown the fuse. And so I'm walking around the RI, the convention center, with a fuse, looking for other analog companies. Like, hey, do you guys have 1 1/4 fuses? Do you have a Oh, you don't. Do you have a fuse? And I see this brand new company setting up their booth, and I see they've got these LA2A things, and I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
do y'all have a fuse? We blew a fuse. Do y'all have a fuse I can have? And Erica, she was like, I don't know, 22 years old or something, and she. Barely knew what a fuse was. She's like, here, let me ask, hey, do we have and
That's so cool.
I just met her there. And then
Mhm.
later that night, or the night or night or two after, we were all on a boat in the canals in Amsterdam with Vincent van Hoff, and he had like a cocktail party for us
That sounds
randomly,
kind of real.
you know, on a boat. And Erica got invited, so we got to hang, and then we just had so much fun, and we became instant friends. And in
Amazing.
fact, this picture in my background is that's me, but who is taking the photo is Erica, because we went
Oh,
backpacking for a couple days north of Tahoe a
amazing.
couple years ago. So we became just total best friends. So as the years went on, they kept saying, "Hey, what about doing a plug-in?" And I had that famous ad, where I'm holding a tube underwater, saying, "This is a plug-in, like a
Yeah.
tube you plug it in."
Yeah.
And anyway, finally we started talking, and they're like, "Look, this is what we want to model this, and this is what we can pay for it, and blah blah." And then they said, our other partners, I know that you're scared like they were. They're scared that the software sales would cannibalize the hardware sales,
Right.
but you're going to see that's not true. And it was kind of scary because, I don't want to shoot my foot off and just kill my hardware company, right? So, um, anyway, we started work on the first product, which was what? The variable mu, I think. And um, and then the massive passive, and then when they did the unison preamps, they wanted the Vox to be their premier preamp in that too. So
Yes.
now, as you know, as everything's settled out over the years, and what I've seen is the UA products act as, say, the demo piece in our range.
Yeah.
Like people can try them. They're not that expensive, couple $100 at worst.
Yeah.
So that's like the entry level product.
Mm-hmm.
Say the Vox plugin is the entry level product, and then the core is your mid range product, and then the Vox is the top dog, right? So there's three tiers.
Yes.
And also what I'm seeing is, folks have been able to play with the plugins, and they don't come to me and ask like, what's a good setting for vocals? Like they've already turned the knobs of the software, and they certainly don't need me to tell them anything because I'm not a recording engineer. It's like, why don't you get your vocalist to sing into that mic and turn those knobs? You're not going to blow anything up.
Nice.
You're the boss. Go for it.
So you've been happy with like how the plugin has been sounding and worked out?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
And the other thing, in addition to kind of being the demonstration version or the entry level version, UA, because they have such a wide reach with their users with the UAD2 platform, it's actually expanded like the visibility of the Manley brand to a ton of people, right?
Yes.
It's that base of the pyramid kind of thing. So it's that relationship has also had very good marketing feedback or contribution to my company as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
What a legendary story of how you became friends with someone in Amsterdam on a boat.
Yeah, like, blew a fuse.
Amazing.
Who's got a fuse? I mean, what if the Waves guys had a fuse?
Right?
That's what I mean.
Oh, it's so funny.
But you never know. It's like, it's like that day that Bill Graham came to teach our class. And that one day changed my whole life. I made that decision that day, like, that's it. I'm going to California to go figure out what's in the music business for me. You know what I mean?
Oh, cool. So what were a few things that you were inspired by that he said?
Well, he explained, he had this 5-finger lecture thing he used to give to people, where you've got your artist and you've got an engineer and you've got a producer, and what the roles of these people are. And he was describing things that happened in the recording studio, and I had no exposure to any of that stuff at all. And but I was kind of a bit of starstruck there, because it's like, oh my, I knew who he was. It's like, oh my God, this guy that's the voice in the opening sentence of the Big Brother and the Holding Company record. Like, that's him announcing Janis Joplin, Four gentlemen, one great broad, Big Brother, doom chicka doom, ba da da. The record begins.
I love Janet.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, that sounds exciting.
Yeah.
I think I'd rather be in the music industry than maybe being a band director in a high school, right? So
I think so. I think it fits. I think it's good
that's what I mean. I could have done that too. I had the education where I could have been doing that, but I do prefer where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Do you play an instrument?
I do, but I I play the keyboards as in I type emails all day long. No,
Yep.
I grew up playing clarinet and
Oh,
saxophones
oh,
and
nice.
a little bit of trumpet and
Oh, cool.
but I don't make time to play. I have all my instruments here, but
Hmm.
I spend too much time working these
Yeah,
days and not enough time on hobbies.
for sure. I love the saxophone. I think there's something.
Do you play?
I don't. My grandmother played sax, and before she passed away, she was 87, still in a jazz band, playing her sax every Tuesday night.
Get out.
I just,
That's awesome.
she was so cool.
It's total hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can still join a big band someday.
Yeah, she
That's
was so
awesome.
fun, and all her friends, just all playing the different instrument, and they would go out to eat after jazz practice, and they were just the coolest group walking into In-N-Out Burger.
That's so cool.
Oh no, that's awesome. Um, so in your experience, I mean, I know that it's rare to be a woman in your position and as a CEO of a company and such in a field where women are underrepresented. Do you feel any pressure in your role to upcoming generations of aspiring like women in audio to kind of represent in any way, or is it, have you had any experiences like that have made you kind of think about the underrepresentation of women?
I think when I was starting my career, I felt a little more, overlooked or discriminated against, overlooked or not taken seriously more because I was young. I was in my 20s. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I was married to the owner of the company. So that was a bit of a disadvantage as far as me standing on my own 2 feet for that early time
Yeah.
before he left. But then since then, I, like I tell people on these panels and stuff, when I'm working, I'm not thinking about what's between my legs, right? I mean, I'm not thinking about that when I'm trying to help you retube a unit or figure out where the hum is coming from. It's not a factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. The other thing, I've always been a bit of a tomboy and hung out with the guys anyway, and um, you know, I don't know. I try to disarm people sometimes. The guys are like, "Oh, really? Oh, can I do that?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course you can retube your unit. It's so easy. Even a girl can do it."
Nice.
I just
Oh,
I
that's great.
I can make that joke because I'm a girl, but
Yeah.
I don't know. They're really in an ideal world, of course. Who cares? It doesn't matter if we're boys or girls or whatever. What we all need to do is excel at what we do and kick ass at what we do. And maybe if we're young and we're female, we have to kick ass even more to prove ourselves. That's for sure. But
Mhm.
I guess some of that might have been wrapped up in my kind of revenge through success
Nice.
drive in that late 90s period now. But these days, come on, man. It's 2021.
Yeah.
Everybody can do this stuff, you know. If you but you have to be good at what you do no matter what you're doing or what gender you are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where
Absolutely.
you identify or who you're married to or how old you are, what color's your skin. I mean, how many other separating factors do we want to name here? It does None of that shit matters. We just If you take on a job or you take on an assignment or someone trusts you to do something, you need to execute that well, no matter who the hell you are.
I love it.
That's my view these days.
Awesome. That's great advice too.
Yeah.
So, aside from saxophone, would it be sax that you would go back to if you had more time in the day, or would it be
Yeah, that was
maybe
if I could play Barry sax in a big band again, that'd be awesome.
nice? What are your other hobbies that you try to make time for during your busy days?
Motorbikes.
Yeah, nice.
I'm a member of the Pasadena Motorcycle Club, which is the third oldest in the world, actually, continuously operating MC.
Oh, very cool.
Um, and I like working with my hands and wrenching on my bikes and
Nice.
that kind of thing. And then also I really try to make time for all my friends too, and especially like this week with Al Schmidt passing, um,
Yes.
just gathering with my buddies either on Zoom or yesterday, a couple of us met up at Berrigan's in Burbank to get together and hang out. But just, it's like, yeah, I could spend 3 hours at lunch today. You know why? Because we all need to go through this process to appreciate Al and connect with each other again after we've been all locked up for a year. And I can go home and work until midnight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. Yeah,
There's
necessary.
no rigid schedule anymore.
Yeah.
so,
Dude,
so I'm gonna dedicate a couple hours to my buddies today,
yeah,
and I'll put the work in later.
for sure. No, I think that's necessary, especially now with vaccines and everything.
Yeah.
Did COVID affect the business in any surprising ways?
Yeah, we doubled the size of the company in the last 2 years. It's just exploded.
Amazing.
So we're hiring right now, and um, Matt's trying to get all the job descriptions up on the portal for that. But
Okay.
um, if you go to manley.com and scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's a careers link, and you
Nice.
go punch that, and there's some jobs posted and more being posted every day. And there's also a place that you can submit your resume if you want to work at Manley and you don't see the job description that you think that you best fit, you can tell us what you can do for us. So
Are there any
um,
remote positions going?
so yeah, the music industry,
Hey, Julia.
everybody's exploded with work, except for the live sound sector. But
Yes.
all of us gear people have
Mhm.
been completely overworked in this last year because
Amazing. It's intense.
folks can't go to the studios in the last year, so they're setting up. They're getting their nest
Yes.
together. People are building home recording rigs,
What I did.
podcast stuff. Like, yeah, maybe I should get a really good microphone. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So our sales, as with all my peers as well, like our sales have all exploded in the last year for sure. And it's not tailed off yet.
That's
We're
incredible.
we're still on this big trajectory. I mean, it's affected us in that we're all doing the work of like 10 people, and we're
Yeah.
trying to hire people to help us. Um, and we're at this big pinch point, this growth period right now. It's difficult. We have to remember to be kind to each other, not bark at each other and attack each other. When we're like, why did that thing? Who dropped the ball on this issue? Because there's plenty of balls that are getting dropped this year because we're juggling way too much, and that's why
Yeah.
we're trying to hire some people to help us. But
All
you
right.
know, we need honest people. That's one thing we need, and
Yeah.
there's a bare minimum there.
Yeah.
But dude, sometimes I just
Right?
really, you need a job and you're cheating the time clock on your first week. Really, get the hell out of here.
I
What the
swear.
hell?
What? Yeah. What are they thinking?
What are they thinking? I don't know, but
Ah,
you know, we just want honest, hardworking people that are half
yes.
smart or fully smart. That's good too.
Nice.
Oh my god.
Just quickly, can we go over Manley microphones? I mean, we've really been delving into
Sure.
this mouthboard gear, but how did you decide to kind of incorporate these different areas to Manley outside of?
Well, that again, going back to Steve Hazelton,
Okay.
he when he was working for us, a couple days a week in the early '90s, like I'm talking late '89, 1990. Um, he also had developed a head amp, a microphone head amp for a MyLab capsule that Doug Sachs used to use at those live, not just live to 2-track, live to lacquer, those direct to disc records that they were doing at the mastering lab
Wow.
at Sheffield Lab. And so Steve Hazelton and David Manley started working on this microphone. And at the same time, very early days was David Josephson building capsules. And so he had developed a CK12 capsule, which is the capsule found in the AKG C12 microphones,
Yeah.
or 414s as well, 414s. And so he was our capsule partner in that. So the first gold microphones, the first 2 units, Steve Hazelton sold to Sean Murphy, who was and is a, a super famous, highly revered orchestral film score recorder.
Wow.
And those were the first 2, and it just
Wow.
you just got to start with the first 2 mics.
Yeah.
And then the next 2, I think, went to Jackson Brown's studio, and he still has them over there.
Whoa.
And on it went. But yeah, there were some issues, that I remember Steve had hooked up the first microphones with solid silver wire to the capsules, and when the capsules, vibrate, they can break those wires off. That's why you want to use a stranded wire there, a flexible wire. You live and learn. And then I remember David Josephson, had not quite perfected like the tensioning techniques of the diaphragm of the capsule. And
Sure.
there were issues. Like there was one issue, like when we'd solder the wires to the capsule, we'd be careful. We'd melt the plastic around the ring, and it would like suck into the hole and create an isolation washer onto the brass tabs that we were soldering to. So there are all kinds of little things that bite you in the ass, when you're just first doing something, and you learn by making mistakes. So
Yes.
that's one piece of advice I always have for people is like, you're going to make mistakes. It's cool. Everyone be patient with each other, because that's where we learn.
Yeah.
Is from our mistakes. And
Agree.
all this kind of material science stuff I've learned over the decades, it's all from messing it up. Because also don't forget, when the company was started, this is before the World Wide Web. So there wasn't like Google, like you could go look up, what's a flexible wire I should be using,
Yeah.
We had to just figure it out. But
That's awesome.
we figured it out by messing it up a couple times, for sure.
That's so impressive. So inspiring. Just keep going, right?
Yeah, figure it out and keep going. But part of that is also, you can't be so damn proud or so insecure that you're not going to admit there's a mistake or an error. You want to dive into it and try to fix a problem, for sure. And I tell people, no one's going to get fired for making a mistake or even making a couple mistakes. Those mistakes are there so we all learn and get better. We'll fire you if you're dishonest about shit. That's what, there's no tolerance for dishonesty.
I like that as a policy.
Yeah.
Across the board.
Yes.
I think that's a good one.
That was a lesson I learned early on in my 20s too, was I had to learn that I'm not perfect, and it's okay to admit I don't know something or I messed something up.
Yes.
And to get on with the resolution of it. That's a thing.
Yes, absolutely. Awesome. I'm just asking Juliet if you would like to unmute yourself to ask any questions you can right now. I'm just going to Facebook. I know that we're wrapping up. EveAnna, you have graciously given us an hour to talk. Thank you so much. Let's see. As a close, can you can you recommend 5 albums to listen to train your ears to good music? That's
Wow. Yeah, like anything Al Schmidt recorded. Speaking of Al,
mhm.
yeah, for sure. I heard a what did I hear the other day? Um, I heard a Sam Cooke
Mm,
record on Sirius XM just the other day,
mm,
just driving around, and I just really paid attention to it and just heard just how natural that mix is.
mm.
It was a Saturday night. It another Saturday night. That song, and
Yeah.
just how delicate all the instruments are. The mix is perfect. It's just not complicated.
Nice.
The talent is there 1,000%. You know, they didn't have auto tune. It's just natural, real, human, and perfect at the same time. Is the best way I can describe that. You know, that guy, he was super brilliant with those things. Um, and you know, like the precision. I mean, don't laugh, audiophiles, because it's kind of played out. But the precision of Steely Dan
Yeah.
and oh, okay, Al also recorded some of that, and Roger, man, that stuff is precise, well constructed, and you know, chord changes are interesting. It's kind of cool stuff as well. It's kind of jazz rock in a way.
Nice.
Um, you know, harder hitting. I mentioned the. I'm just coming up with some just random good sounding records, I guess. That
Yeah.
Battle of Los Angeles,
Yeah.
Rage Against the Machine records, really good sounding as well. Um,
Nice. I'll post that in the.
yeah, you know, I have to admit, I've become a really lazy audiophile in the last years. You know, I always have music playing around me, but admittedly, I've just got my Sonos radios on, and I've been just digging into more obscure music, and I'm not really listening for sound quality at this minute of my life, to put it
Mhm.
like that. So I found some really cool radio shows and DJs that dig up, that unearth some new to me music, you know, from the 60s and so on. I've been listening to those. There's this one guy named Larry Grogan who
Oh,
has a show. He has a couple radio shows. One's called Funky 16 Corners. It's a lot of soul music and stuff from the 60s. And then the other show is called Testify with an exclamation point.
nice.
And he unearths and also, you know, gives you some information about the artists and the recordings and stuff between the breaks. And I really love learning about some of that music I that many of us missed. He digs up very obscure 45s and plays them. And sonically, they sound like ass, but just musically, it's all kind of fresh to me, at
I
least.
love it. No, that's
So I've been kind of just gravitating towards interesting uh, disc jockeys, you know,
yeah.
on these radio shows. So
Nice.
WFMU out in New York is a really great station for a lot. They have all kinds of great radio shows on there. And then locally, I listen to Nick Harcourt in the morning on 88.1 here in Los Angeles on the Cal State Northridge radio station. And yeah,
Nice.
you
Awesome.
know,
And I'll post in the notes for this in the group, I'll post maybe some top records that
you
Alice
know, more
posted.
music, less news definitely is the
Yeah,
theme for 2021.
absolutely.
Yeah.
One last question from Juliet.
I
What
guess
are
I could share with you I do have like a favorite playlist
Oh, yeah.
that I've made up on Spotify of
Sure.
kind of off. They're not all like the most popular songs in the world, and there's a wide variety of music on it, and it's the playlist like I've downloaded to my phone. So when I'm offline on a motorcycle, that's what I'm
Yeah.
listening to. And there's quite a few songs that are kind of nostalgic for me because
Sure.
music for me also brings up lots of memories. Like,
Yes.
you know, I can remember, you know, hearing Reeling in the Years when I was a kid, and my
Mhm.
auntie was down to visit, and I remember her dancing and singing, "Oh, we really get you." You know, it's just like a little snapshot that makes me
Oh,
smile whenever I hear that song. I think of my
yeah.
auntie Barbie.
Love it.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
I can share that to you. You can put it in the comments.
Yeah, that would be great. I love music like that. Songs I have that remind me of a place or an age or a time, and it's just they always make me so happy. And
Yeah, for sure.
might not even reflect the kind of style I play at all, but you know, they're for me.
It's awesome. Yeah, so my Spotify username is Tubes Rule. I think
Oh,
it is.
nice.
And
Cool.
the shared playlist is um the I what's it called? I forget what it's called. Vanimal 2015 is the name of that playlist because I started that playlist in 2015.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you.
All right,
Um,
there's like 500 or 600 songs on it.
oh,
It's a little offbeat.
nice. Well, that'll keep us busy. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for your time and for chatting. And this has been so inspiring. And I can't wait to see the comments later as more people come into the group.
Thanks. I popped up the Women in Audio group on Facebook and I submitted my request to join.
Awesome.
So someone has to let me in.
We're gonna let you in.
So if you let me in, then I can answer more questions.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Otherwise, you can hit me up from my website, from the general contact page that gets you to me.
Okay.
And that's www.manley.com.
Nice. Perfect.
And that's Manley.
Right. Awesome. And I'll post that too, just in case.
Good.
Awesome. Well, have a great rest of your day.
Cool. It's such an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.